Byline Audio.
Hello, it's Adrian Goldberg and welcome to the Byline podcast from the Byline Times. It's what the papers don't say, what radio doesn't report and what telly doesn't tell you. This time, what the heck is Byline Audio? If you follow our social media accounts, you might have seen reference to new podcasts from the Byline stable. So the first thing to say is they are not replacing this podcast. I'll continue to offer you the best news commentary with the occasional investigation thrown in, on average twice a week. But Byline is also offering more for your listening pleasure. To explain, I've got the Byline Times executive editor Peter Jukes with me, the writer and BAFTA award-winning actress Joanna Scanlon, John Mitchinson, former QI question setter, the man who created the publishing house Unbound, and Otto English. And John and Otto, I have to say, their contribution is utter bollocks. So
you might like to explain that Otto English, also known as Andrew Scott, is a best-selling author of Fake Heroes and Faith History. Fake Heroes is in paperback as we speak.
It is out on Thursday.
And you can check a previous podcast that we ran with Otto, aka Andrew, a few months ago. That is still available. So, Peter, tell us about Byline Audio then.
Well, we noticed a lot of young people were wandering around with these funny white things in their ears. And we realized that actually a lot of people get news by audio now. They are, and I used to, in the days gone by when I listened to Radio 4, because you could do the ironing, you could do the washing up, bit of cooking, and you weren't stuck in front of a screen. And it's basically, we're working with Marcus de Cruz, an old colleague of mine, and he came up with the idea initially to voice all the Byline Times articles, which are now you can listen to. And actually, I do end up listening, except when they're in my voice, a bit weird. When they weren't in my voice, they were fine. And there is something about you will listen to things when you won't read. Then the second thought, following in the amazing kind of wake created by that passenger liner of your podcast, Adrian, is we could swim in the wake, find some of the bits of, dregs in your wake. Flotsam, that's what I was looking for. Thank you, John, who always has the words. And pick up, people who are interested in your podcast and move it. Not move it away from Adrian, because we never want to do that. That is a ship we steer by. But to go a bit sort of more cultural. And there are two reasons for that. One is, what if Keir Starmer gets in and Joe Biden wins, right? There is a certain extent that this terrifying last sort of 14 years we've been living through might get a bit quiet. They might be a little less turbulent. And that line said by one of the people who caused all this turbulence, Steve Bannon, co-founder of Cambridge Analytica, Trump's campaign manager, is that culture is upstream of politics. So we wanted a bit more of a cultural offering. Young folks like culture, I believe, but also just to widen the Byline Times sort of offering. But underlying that is a principle of stern steel, of kind of a project, just as Byline Times is what the papers don't say, and Byline TV what the TV doesn't show, and Byline Podcasts what the radio doesn't report. We wanted to go against what most cultural offerings are these days. And what are they? They are mainly determined by two things. One is the obvious one of PR cycles. So somebody's launching a perfume, or Otto English is selling yet another book. And then suddenly is everywhere. We know that the PR agencies, the sales, and in a way our culture is being commodified, as it always has been for years, into telling us stuff is relevant because it's in the shops now, it's on Netflix now, or whatever. So, we know people who've worked in PR. It is kind of a manufactured process, but that's what they call, Chomsky, I think, called it, the manufacture of consensus, and that happens in news, but also happens in culture. Now we have this other thing, and that's the algorithm, what I call the automation of consensus. In that, I don't know if you've noticed, but if I go on Amazon, they always recommend me my own books. You must be snowed with Otto, with their recommendations for your books.
And what a recommendation that is. I love reading them.
Yes, I was going to say, do you order them regularly?
I order them off myself.
So what culture tells you about is what you already know. If you read the blogs of Dominic Cummings, who was responsible largely for the screw-up of Brexit, he's a big data guy, and it's all about Bayesian probabilities. You can predict people's behavior if you have enough data about them. This world of probability, which makes us sort of potentially engineered by Cambridge Analytica, and is completely the opposite of culture. Culture is the world of possibilities, not probabilities. This weird,
And
strange
stumbling across stuff.
There used to be a site called Stumble Upon, didn't there?
Yeah,
And that was
but
great.
we don't need a site. A lot of kids today, my own kids included, have regained the stumble upon philosophy of going in a record store
vinyl.
and picking up vinyl. And I think the vinyl sort of resurgence, in part, is down to that. Kids don't want to be led entirely by algorithms. They want to stumble upon stuff again. My son is not alone among late teenage people who are interested in art. He wanders around bookshops like a normal person, and second-hand bookshops.
You always find something you never knew.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
wanted.
Yeah.
They
And I
don't
can see
have
that coming
Kindles,
back.
you know. The young people I know don't have Kindles. They're not interested in Amazon's algorithms. What they're interested in is, as you say, discovery. One of the things in the show that we talked about was the internet getting thinner. And back in the early days, that I feel lucky thing on Google was sort of the point of it. You'd have a bit of a lucky dip, and the internet would throw you up something that you didn't know. Now you feel it's all been driven by.
You know this from court cases, don't it? It's all been
by
driven
commerce.
advertising.
Yeah. Search has been turned into sort of yet another branch of surveillance stroke commodity capitalism.
So interesting enough, and maybe we might talk to if we can resurrect the AI form of Gina Scanlon, a great BAFTA Award-winning actor who could emulate AI in our show, Utter Bollocks, which underneath this slightly raucous and unpolite title is deeply serious, delving into the back end of Google, the back end of the mind of Otto and John, which is capacious and endless and seems to go nowhere. Testing that against AI. So it's a challenge between, you can't imagine know-it-alls quite as big as John and Otto, testing that against AI and see who can win. And so I'm not going to give anything away. No, this is 12 episodes. And we've launched the first one this last Thursday. That was the midweek of May, and they'll run to the end of July. And this is just the beginning of other offerings. For example, Dawn Butler MP has come up with this idea of if only, get people from Tories, Labour, poets, scientists, and talk about coming up with an idea of if only. And if they can agree on something, if only, across their professions of party divide, and then we're kind of building the city with its own laws, if only in assemblies. We also have an amazing other offering from our editor of Byline Times, Heidi Matharo, who is going on a road trip with another great writer for Byline Times and many other people, Bonnie Greer, through Americana. So it's like Thelma and Louise, so they don't die at the end, hopefully. Hopefully. Well, no, I'm sure they won't. I'm sure, and the insurance won't let me that happen. But they like the first two episodes, they visit the O.J. trial, O.J. Simpson trial, talk about race and justice. Second one, the Godfather movie, talk about immigration acceptance. Fascinating stuff. So it's just a little bit offbeat, a little bit, just to widen offering, but with the stern steel of truth, the mission to inform as well as entertain.
I've got to say, Joe, you're being very quiet here, and it's most remiss of you. Are we allowed to say, Peter's already given the secret away, that you are the voice of AI on Utter Bollocks?
Yes, and isn't that fun? To be AI. Well, I don't want to give a spoiler on the character of AI, but let's call her jolly reasonable. It's quite interesting if you do ask AI what the answer to the questions which John and Otto have been exploring. What comes out is so boringly predictable that you just don't want to live in the AI world. You want to be back in the human world with the spontaneity and all the anomalies.
So are you the voice of what you would get if you AI questioned their Utter Bollocks questions?
Yeah, I, just to introduce myself, I'm an actress. I'm not going to sit discursively exploring these questions myself because I simply don't have the data to be able to do so. But we've asked the same question to Otto, John, and AI. And so I have the delightful job of being able to pass on AI's opinion.
And we should say, Otto, as well, that this series draws on your book about great myths and puncturing the great myths, which is a bestseller.
Amazing books. Yes, both my books did that to some extent. The first one was fake history, and then the other one was more about people. And I'm writing another one in a similar vein. So, yes, I mean, the truth of lives and the truth of history is always far more interesting than the bullshit you've been brought up with. And it's an unending joy. Because I mean, you could pretty much land on any story you've been told in your life and dig in. We were talking just today about carrots.
We were. Myth-busting.
Myth-busting carrots,
Do
yes.
carrots help you see in the dark?
I know, it's a cracker. I mean, it's not a cracker, it's a carrot.
Peter, talk to me a bit more as well about the Dawn Butler podcast. She's a Labour MP, but very independent-minded MP as well. And this is taking her really away from her day-to-day political concerns.
Yeah, no, Dawn's one of the amazing MP. Whatever her politics are, she's kind of on the left of the Labour Party, I think. When you go to the Labour Party conference, which I did last year, I haven't been for many years, because for Byline, everybody goes, "Are you going to the Dawn Butler party?" A huge queue, and we got wafted in. One of the good things about running a newspaper is the beginning of corruption, next in, back door of number 10 with Rupert Murdoch. And she's got such amazing character. I should mention Marcus and Ed. They're developing the show with her. And she just knows such an eclectic bunch of people. So, I think our first podcast will be a rap poet and a well-known right-wing Conservative MP talking about what they might have in common. And it is kind of, we wanted it's not a very good name otherwise, call it Hinterlands. It's kind of what are the things behind politics which actually we can join on, common experiences, often suffering. We talked this episode we just recorded today about ghosts, and Boris Johnson and David Cameron. John and Otto both have stories about all three of them, or those two and then the rest of the cohort of ghosts, that actually our personal connections, our cultural, our real lifestyles are much richer, more profound and more connected than the political discourse would allow us. And rather than go down the GB News route and the kind of, Worldwide Wrestling Foundation, let's create a fight between these two people who probably agree with each other on most other things. Let's find common ground among the common culture among these people who don't seem to agree with each other.
And how do people access these various offerings then? Because there's going to be versions, aren't there? They'll be available on all your regular podcast platforms, but there will be free-to-air versions and there will be paywalled versions. Yeah.
Well, following behind this luxury streamliner of your podcast, Adrian, we want things free to view and free to hear, and that's the principle of Byline Times, the website. Obviously, we have to pay for the engineers, and it's quite expensive kit and distribution. So we're asking people to join up for extra content. And what you've forgotten to tell people in your modesty and shyness, Adrian, which makes you a great journalist, makes you listen to people, is that we'll have extra bonus content from you. And I've christened it. I'm not letting him get away with changing the title. It's going to be called The Goldberg Variations. A little musical pun there, which I'm sure some of you conoscenti will get. And so, for people who want more, they can pay, not very much, and they'll, with £5 a month, I think, is get all the extra content from all the podcasts. We've got 3 or 4 more coming down the line this year. You get a probably bonus 20 minutes or so. So for utter bollocks, you get even more bollocks, which, John and Otto can juggle bollocks till the cows come home. And I join them juggling bollocks. Sorry, I just realised what I said. No, I knew. And then with Americana, we go in the diner after our road journey, which doesn't end up going over a cliff, with Bonnie and Hardeep, and we talk about what we've seen. With Dawn's podcast, we go into an assembly of if only and trying to build laws and structures for this kind of metaverse of if only. And I don't know what we're going to do with the Goldberg Variations, Adrian. We'll think of something sufficiently horrible and intimate for you to do. And if people pay for that, they get to hear it. They get to hear the embarrassment. It's unscripted. It's impromptu. No outtakes. It's just raw, unplugged Byline.
Do you listen to a lot of podcasts, Otto, Andrew?
Weirdly, I do when I'm in the formulating ideas stage of a book. Whilst I was formulating the current one, I listened to loads and loads of sort of history podcasts and true history podcasts and stuff like that. Yeah.
I mean, I spend too much of my life making them, to be honest, to listen to lots of them. But I do like Rest is History, Rest is Politics. And there's a brilliant one on country music called Cocaine and Rhinestones, which I can hugely recommend. It's
Great title.
one of the best music podcasts I've heard. But yes, I mean, I think like Otto says, it's and Peter earlier, where podcasts work is if you've got time to kill, if you're driving or if you're doing anything that doesn't require you sitting in front of a screen, then it's just radio with laughs, isn't it?
Yeah, I've always listened to radio, speech radio, all my life. My parents always had it on. And I'm absolutely thrilled by this expansion into speech and talk. I mean, some of it can be a little bit unwieldy, and there's maybe some of the skills of great radio making are required to just snip and do a few tucks just so that things aren't too empty or repetitive. But I listen to loads and loads of podcasts because I'm fascinated by the process of people unpacking thoughts from different angles. I mean, if anything, I think there's a danger that that's getting a little bit too narrow. So I'm really glad to be contributing to the bandwidth a little bit.
Well, I do think we're in a
Byline.
kind of golden age of audio, though, because there was a time when speech radio was pretty much written off. Yeah. And thanks to the technology now, we live in a time when there's more talk radio, albeit in podcast form, in the UK than we've ever had before. Maybe in the States it's different because they had a much bigger talk radio tradition. Ours has been very much dominated by the BBC. Suddenly it's out there and it's everywhere.
Yeah, and I think we're lonely. I think as a species, we are now lonely. The way we live creates separation. And there's something about podcasting and listening to podcasts which fills something of that gap. It's friendship at some level. And I find all those activities we have to do every day are enhanced now by listening. And I know I now get in the car and switch off the radio and put on my phone so I can continue to listen to podcasts instead of listening to radio. I think it's multiple, and there's something exciting about that.
Peter, if people want to access these various Byline audio offerings, this podcast, the Byline podcast, will remain free to air and be available where it always has been, on your regular podcast platforms. If people want to access the new stuff, how do they do that?
Well, all they have to do, Adrian, is follow your Twitter feed, follow you down the rabbit hole, down to Byline Podcasts, as we've aptly renamed, because you become big, you're kind of bigger brand, you're bigger than Byline Times, you're part of the Byline family, to the source of all fount of all wisdom and joy, which is bylineaudio.com. And there's a subscribe button. As I said, Byline TV members get it for free or a discount, 100% discount for a year. You can join us. And as I said, we can interact with you. You can put questions, you can build a community. More than anything, you can keep us going because this is not free. And it's great. Compared with TV, it's much lower cost, isn't it? And the great thing is you can edit, and hopefully I'll get edited without seeing a jump cut. So yeah, go to bylineaudio.com and support us, and we'll keep going.
John, Joanna, Otto, Andrew, Peter, thank you. Marcus and Ed as well, thank you for your effort. And just to remind you, if you want to support this podcast, please take out a subscription to the Byline Times. We mustn't forget our fantastic monthly newspaper, edited by Hardeep Matharo. As I speak, the next edition is about to hit the newsstands and drop on your doormat. Do take out a subscription over at bylinetimes.com and support our work here on the Byline Times podcast and the brilliant work of our journalists in print as well. We'll see you again very soon. Thanks for listening. Ta-da.